All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Universe 2.0 Sideswipe and also kinda Sunstreaker. Because, I'm calling this the Sideswipe review, but there's really no talking about one of these guys without talking about the other one as well. If you're unfamiliar, these two do share a mold, but to get around the problem of, the original G1 Sideswipe and Sunstreaker having the same alt mode but very different robot modes, they basically designed this mold so that it had like a variability to the robot mode, so you can kind of flip a few things around and make it look quite different, which is also why they ended up using this mold for punch counter punch at some point as well. But it's a decent mold. I've got some qualms with it. I do really like the alt modes. The robot modes are a little bit awkward, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, no, they don't turn into the like Lamborghini Countach like the originals did. They turn into kind of like a facsimile of a newer Lamborghini. I don't know a ton about cars, but they are still based on a Lamborghini model, just like one that was more current to the time rather than the original one from the 80s, 70s, whenever the Countach is from. But yeah, no, they look pretty good in their alt mode, especially Sideswipe. He's got kind of like a really nice sort of like pearlescence to the red plastic here, which obviously doesn't match very well with the painted red of the hood here, but it's never really bothered me. I also really like the black stripe going down the side here. He's got nice painted details all the way around. He's got swipe written on his license plate there, whereas Sunstreaker has We Are 84, which, I mean, they're not really the same, but whatever. I guess that's better than them putting like streak on this guy. But yeah, no, good painted details all around. I definitely think that in alt mode, especially, Sideswipe looks a little bit flashier just because of that pearlescence to the plastic, whereas, Sunstreaker is more of like kind of just a regular flat yellow plastic, which is kind of a shame since Sunstreaker is supposed to be the one who's like a little bit flashier, a little bit more obsessed with looks, but, they still both look good. Now, both figures did originally come with both of these accessories. I got these guys on eBay, like, secondhand a while ago, so I only have one version of each, which is enough for me because I don't need both for both of them. But they come with this little gun here, which can be stored underneath by just pegging into these two tabs here, and then it becomes comes like exhaust ports for the vehicle, which is kind of nice. And then obviously it comes with like the super engine intake or whatever this is ever supposed to have been, which just pegs onto the top here. I believe that this is the one that came with Sideswipe and this is the one that came with Sunstreaker, because I think the gun that came with Sideswipe had some like black paint on the top. I can't totally remember, but either way, that's how you store the weapons. For me, I tend to just keep this with Sunstreaker and keep the other gun with Sideswipe, just so that they have some other difference there. And like with the original toys, Sideswipe never had the supercar intake or whatever it's supposed to be. So that's just kind of how I do it. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, I think I'll bring on the only ones that really matter, which is our modern versions of Sideswipe and Sunstreaker from both Kingdom and Earthrise respectively. And yeah, they're obviously going for a very different takes here. These guys are kind of like newer Lamborghinis, whereas these guys are meant to look a bit more like the Countach, just without the spoiler. And I personally prefer the way that they did these guys in terms of like having them be totally separate molds that just like turn into a very, very similar alt mode. I think that was really cool, a really cool design for these. But this was a neat kind of design solution for the time to just have them be the same mold and have it have a bit of a variable robot mode. But yeah, to get into transformation, I'll just do one of them, obviously. You can take off the weapons here. First thing you want to do is take the entire back bumper section, and it'll just kind of like double hinge out on this hinge and this ball joint, and then just rotate it so it kind of sits in front of the wheel like that. And then you want to kind of loosen this section up just so that these tabs kind of unlock from each other. And then you can kind of, this is one of the like clunkier bits of the transformation, because he's got a very compact transformation. So like sometimes things have a little bit of a difficult time kind of having the clearance to get around each other smoothly, but basically you just want to unfold the knees. What are lees? Unfold the knees just like that, and then the feet are kind of rotated on the inside here. You can use this little tab to help pull them out, and then you want to rotate them around so that they sit forward like that, and then take the entire shin here and just rotate it 90 degrees so it sits like that. And then specifically on Sideswipe but not on Sunstreaker, you want to rotate them around at the waist. Then you want to take these arm sections, again, kind of unpeg these panels just enough so that they're kind of, you know, not interlocked into this section. And then you want to take the entire front of the car and pull it up. It's on kind of two extending joints here, this clear bit here, and then this white bit up here. And then once you've done that, that gives you the clearance to kind of rotate these around, because otherwise the wheels kind of bump into these you know, like hinge sections here while that is still collapsed. And then while you're rotating that around, you also want to rotate it around on this panel here so it can sit around like that, which is a little bit clunky and it's a little bit annoying to do, but it's not too bad. Honestly, this guy's transformation is a lot more of a pain when going back into vehicle mode, but it's not too bad going to robot mode. And then you want to flip up this little grill section if it hasn't done it automatically. And then with this fully extended, you double hinge this down like this. So this section kind of sits on the chest there like that. Then for the arms, we kind of rotate them forward. And again, you know, this is going to be a little bit variable depending on which one you're doing, but you just want to straighten them out. And then you can either just rotate these panels to the back, which is kind of what I prefer doing, or you can rotate them to the side so they sit off the side of his arms. I think either looks fine. It's on this rotation joint so that, you know, you could have the arms be the other way for Sunstreaker, which is clever, but I personally prefer them just kind of hanging out off the back of the arms like this. I feel like it just gets in the way a little bit less. And then the neat part of this guy's transformation is for the Sunstreaker chest, so it's like oriented properly, you actually rotate this around and it like auto-morphs out his head, which is kind of fun. And there we have Sideswipe in his robot mode. And yeah, I would say he looks okay. Like I said before, there's just kind of like a lanky awkwardness to this guy's design that I've never been really the biggest fan of. Like, he looks fine, all things considered. It's just, I don't know, there's really something I can't quite put my finger on that's just like about the proportions of this guy that makes him look like a little bit too robotic and not in the way that you'd like want, which is a weird thing to say about Transformers. But yeah, like I said, if you know, we bring back on Sunstreaker here, you can see all the differences in the robot mode orientation. They're not like totally interchangeable because, like, you know, to make this design work, basically the molds for their hands have to be on the opposite side, because otherwise when you turn it around, the hand would be facing backwards, which was one limitation to the the punch counter punch version of this guy, because in one mode his hands were always going to be facing backwards, which is a little weird. But yeah, other than that, you know, it's just like you rotate this around and then, you know, rotate the arms around, and that's pretty much it. You know, what's kind of neat about Sunstreaker too is when you rotate his head down, his little horn pieces here to make room are on like springs, so like it like automatically collapses, which is kind of cool to see when you're actually rotating it up. But yeah, no, these guys look okay. There's some fun stuff about their design, but like I said, I've just never really been a huge fan of the, you know, overall lankiness and awkwardness. But yeah, and to get into articulation, the head is on a ball joint here, which can rotate around, gets a decent amount of wiggle back and forth. The shoulders are on ball joints, which can rotate around and go out to the side only about that far. He also has this joint, which you can kind of use as a butterfly joint. Honestly, I wish it locked in place a little bit better because it's a little bit clunky and it always like clicks past stuff, but it, you know, still kind of moves out of the way in the way that you don't want it to. He has a bicep swivel, a double jointed elbow, which is nice, a wrist swivel. He's got a waist cut, obviously, there for transformation. His hips can go forward only about that far before they bump into the kind of like hip skirt thing. Back about that far, out to the side only about that far. He's got a thigh swivel, but it's like right above the knee, right there. He's got you know, a degree or two under 90 degrees of bend at the knee. And then because of the feet, the way that they're oriented, they're on ball joints and they're also on these, you know, stalks. So you can kind of rotate them around and give them ankle tilt and do forward and back, but they're kind of like, you know, recessed inside this like leg chunk. So if you rotate them too far to the side, this starts to like bump into the ground. So it's a little bit awkward. Also, one thing that I've always been a little bit annoyed about with him is just like, because of this transformation joint, it's kind of hard to get him like standing up straight without his legs kind of, you know, being awkward, especially because on mine, that joint is just like a little bit looser than you'd want it to be. But you know, it still works, all things considered. There's just like a lot of little moving parts on him that are kind of annoying to like get into place when posing him. Obviously, we can bring back on the weapons here. You can have him hold this, you know, I guess either direction if you wanted him to hold it like that, with the exhaust ports being the gun. But, you know, he can hold his little pistol there. I don't remember if there's really any place to store this, because like obviously where it's stored in alt mode, kind of goes away, but you can plug it onto the shoulder to be his like, shoulder cannon. And that works well enough for storage. And then for this piece here, you can just peg it onto the back, which obviously we'd want to do with Sunstreaker. There is another feature to these, so you can kind of have that sitting behind his head, and you can also fold these up if you want, which is what I usually do, just so it's a little bit less obvious. And there is another feature to these weapons where you're supposed to be able to like attach them together by like taking this piece and kind of sandwiching it underneath here, and then these cutouts on the little intake sections are supposed to go around the thick part of the gun. I've gotten it to happen a few times. It's a little bit clunky and it always wants to kind of separate itself, but that's ultimately the effect that you're looking for, which honestly I don't even think really looks that great, but it is an option. I guess it was just some way of like incorporating this as a weapon and not just like a backpack piece, because there's no really way for him to hold this without it being attached to the other gun. So I don't know. I guess I see what they were going with there, but it's never worked all that well, and it kind of doesn't like really look all that great either. So I usually just leave this on the back of Sunstreaker and call it a day, but you do have that option there. Just get this tabbed back in place. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here they are again with Kingdom and Earthrise, Sideswipe, and Sunstreaker. So you can see they're pretty tall deluxes, especially, even for the time, they kind of tower over a lot of other figures. But yeah, they're like, there's some Voyagers that aren't even this tall nowadays. But yeah, still overall, just proportions wise, I think that these two look a lot better, which, they should. They're updated versions. But, there's some neat stuff going on with this mold, but it's never been one of my favorites, all things considered. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to these guys. They're lanky, they're a little bit awkward. The transformation, especially going back into alt mode, is kind of a pain. It's not really as smooth and as fun as like this transformation. There's a reason I use this guy as my like standard size comparison, just because he's got such a smooth, easy transformation, so it's not a pain to do back and forth. I think the whole idea of having these guys have that variable robot mode is a really interesting like sort of gimmick to make these two work and be the same mold. But I definitely prefer the versions where they're just totally different molds that have a very similar looking alt mode. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to them. They're fun. They're just not really my favorites. But yeah, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Make sure to check me out on my Instagram account. That's toys.n.art. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Universe 2.0 Sideswipe and also Sunstreaker.